All right, this is the annual organizational meeting of the Ferndale Public Schools Board of Education. We'll call this meeting to order at 7:02. Roll call, Ms. Shepherd.
Unmute myself. Davison.
Here.
Dookie.
Here.
Eltert. Where is she? I saw her.
Here. I'm
Yeah,
here.
she's here.
Hart.
Here.
Abraham.
Here.
Latash.
Here.
O'Donnell.
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Next up on the agenda is the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you'd like to join, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands for, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. The board has had a chance to review the agenda. Are there any requested amendments at this time? All right, hearing none, with unanimous consent, the agenda is approved. And now we will move into public comments. So this is a time for public participation in the meeting. The Board of Education intends the public to have many opportunities to address the board and administration of the school district. This includes email, phones, face-to-face meetings, community gatherings, public hearings, and other public meetings. As noted at the top of the agenda, this is a meeting open to the public. We want to provide fair and impartial guidelines for participation as required by the Open Meeting Act and encourage transparency and equal treatment for everyone in attendance. We also recognize that an effective meeting facilitates better decisions and promotes openness by allowing more people to stay for the full length of the meeting. To meet these goals, please note the following. We ask that you identify yourself and list contact information to help administrators follow up with you on your comment. If you do not wish to do so, please identify yourself. And if you need a response, please provide contact information so that we can follow up after the meeting. Each person will have one opportunity to address the board for up to 3 minutes. Comments or questions should be directed to the board president. The secretary or vice president, Sandra, will ask you to keep time at this point if you are willing. This period of the public comment is for both non-agenda items and issues that are on the agenda. Public comment will end at the close of this part of the agenda. In the event that the number of people wishing to comment requires longer than 30 minutes, public comment will temporarily be postponed after 30 minutes and time will be added at the end of the meeting for those who did not get a chance to speak. Complaints about staff should be made outside board meetings and should follow the applicable board policy. Please contact the superintendent's office if you have any questions. The board cannot respond to complaints about employees in public. This is meant to promote fairness to the staff person and the complaint. The Ferndale Public Schools community acts with great civility towards one another. Please help us maintain that tradition during public comment. So if you want to public comment, please just unmute yourself and speak. Anyone? All right. Well, at this point, we will close public comment. All right. Now we are moving to the oath of office. Today we'll be swearing in elected board members Sarah Elter, Anna Ibrahim, and Jennifer Latash. And I will hand it over to Ms. Kim Shepherd to conduct the oath of office.
Okay, I do think we're going to do Sarah first, if we go alphabetically. So Sarah, are you ready?
I'm ready.
I have to read it to you. And I guess you just, I don't know if you repeat after me. I think you do, because I haven't done it in a while now. Sorry.
Yes, repeat after you. Yeah.
Okay. You ready, Sarah?
I'm ready.
Having been duly elected as a member of the Board of Education,
Having
I don't
been,
want to go too fast,
no, you're good. Having been duly elected as a member of the Board of Education
for the period beginning January 1st, 2021 and expiring December 31st, 2024,
for the period beginning January 1st, 2021 and expiring December 31st, 2024,
yes, by the Ferndale Board of Education at the annual organization meeting held on Monday, January 4th, 2021.
by the Ferndale Board of Education at the annual organization meeting held on Monday, January 4th, 2021.
I hereby declare my eligibility
I hereby declare my eligibility
to accept said position in accordance with the provisions
to accept said position in accordance with the provisions
of Section 1010-4
of Section 1010-4
of the General School Laws, State of Michigan revision of 1976.
of the General School Laws, State of Michigan, revision of 1976.
I do further solemnly swear or affirm
I do further solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Michigan,
and the Constitution of the State of Michigan,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of member of the Board of Education of Ferndale Schools
of the office of member of the Board of Education of Ferndale Public Schools
to the best of my ability.
to the best of my ability.
That is it. You're officially a board member. Welcome.
Thank you.
I will need you to sign it soon.
I'll sign and scan it over to you.
Okay, thank you. Anna, you're next.
Okay, now go
You ready?
slow because I should have printed mine out, but I didn't.
Okay,
So,
okay, not a problem.
okay.
Ready? So I won't do as many words.
Okay.
Having been duly elected
Having been duly elected
as a member of the Board of Education
as a member of the Board of Education
for the period beginning
for the period beginning
January 1st, 2021 and expiring December 31st, 2024.
beginning January 1st, 2021 and expiring December 31st, 2024
Yeah, by the Ferndale Board of Education
by the Ferndale Board of Education
at the annual organization meeting
at the annual Board of Education meeting
held on Monday, January 4th, 2021.
held on January 4th, 2021.
I hereby declare my eligibility,
I hereby declare my eligibility
to accept said position
to accept said position
in accordance with the provisions
in accordance with the provisions
of Section 1010-4
of Section 1010-4
of the General School Laws,
of the General School Laws
State of Michigan revision of 1976.
of the State of Michigan revision 1976.
Yes. I do further solemnly swear
I do further solemnly swear
that I will support
that I will support
the Constitution of the United States of America
the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Michigan,
and the Constitution of the State of Michigan,
and that I will faithfully
and that I will faithfully
discharge the duties of the office
discharge the duties of the office
of member of the Board of Education
of the member of the Board of Education
of Ferndale Public Schools to the best of my ability.
as a member of the Board of Education to the best of my ability.
And you are officially a board member again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome. Last but not least, Jennifer, are you ready?
I'm all set.
Okay, I know you know this.
It's been a few years.
Pardon me?
I said it's been a few years since I had to do this.
Oh yeah, but you know it, honey. So I'm just gonna run right through it. I'm just kidding. Having been duly elected
Having been duly elected
as a member of the Board of Education
as a member of the Board of Education
for the period beginning January 1st, 2020 and expiring December 31st, 2024,
for the period beginning January 1st, 2021 and expiring December 31st of 2024
by the Ferndale Board of Education
by the Ferndale Board of Education
at the annual organization meeting
at the annual organization meeting
held on Monday, January 4th, 2021.
held on Monday, January 4th, 2021.
I hereby declare my eligibility
I hereby declare my eligibility
to accept said position in accordance
to accept said position in accordance
with the provisions of Section 1010-4
with the provisions of Section 1010-4
of the General School Laws,
of the General School Laws,
State of Michigan, revision of 1976.
State of Michigan, revision of 1976.
I do further solemnly swear
I do further solemnly swear
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
that I will support the Constitution of the United States of America
and the Constitution of the State of Michigan,
and the Constitution of the State of Michigan,
and that I will faithfully discharge
and that I will faithfully discharge
the duties of the office
the duties of the office
of member of the Board of Education
of member of the Board of Education
of Ferndale Public Schools to the best of my ability.
of Ferndale Public Schools to the best of my ability.
You're officially a board member again. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, well, congratulations to the 3 board members who were elected this past term to serve for 4 years. We appreciate your service and sacrifice for the betterment of the students of Ferndale Public Schools. Now we move into the organizational meeting agenda items, which include the election of the officers. Election of the officers of 0152 of the Board of Education bylaws call for the election of board officers at the annual organization meeting of the board. The officers to be elected include the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary. Upon election of the president, they will take over and chair the rest of the meeting and the rest of the appointments, thankfully. So procedurally, the way that this will work is there can be discussion. We'll have call for nominations. As soon as we receive all the nominations, we'll close those, and then we'll wait for a motion to elect a president and conduct a roll call vote. So I'll either open it up to nominations or discussion.
I nominate Mike Davison to be president again this year.
I second that.
All right. Procedurally, I just have to ask, are there any other nominations?
Oh,
I'm sorry. All right.
No.
So we have a motion and a motion by Jackie and second by Anna. A roll call vote, please.
And this is on Mike's election or to close nominations?
Oh, yeah, is it to close nominations?
Just to make things go quickly, can we just do the close nominations by unanimous consent? So I move that we close nominations by unanimous consent. So then if someone objects, they can do so.
Yes. Any objections? All right, that will be a close to nominations. Roll call.
All righty. Davison.
Yes.
Dookie.
Yes.
Elturk.
Yes.
Hart.
Yes.
Ibrahim.
Yes.
Latash.
Yes.
O'Donnell.
Yes.
Thank you. With
Thank
7
you.
votes.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. With 7 yes votes, I will be president of the Board of Education again for this year. And of course, I hope to be a good steward of this position and serve the district well. So that will take us to the position of vice president of the school board. Is there a nomination for vice president of the school board for this this year?
I nominate Sandra Dookie.
I would
Second.
Who did the second?
Seconded by Jen.
Okay.
By unanimous consent, we are closed to further nominations. Okay. Well, before I say, I'd say before I say that, are there any other nominations for vice president? All right. So by unanimous consent, we will close that and roll call, Ms. Shepherd.
Dookie.
Yes.
Elturk.
Yes.
Hart.
Yes.
Ibrahim.
Yes.
Latash.
Yes.
O'Donnell.
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With 7 yes votes, Sandra Dookie unanimously will be the vice president of the Board of Education for this school year. That brings us to request C, the position of secretary for this school year. Is there a nomination for secretary? I would like to nominate Jackie Hart.
Second.
Was that seconded by Jen?
It was seconded by Jen.
Okay, thanks.
Are there any other nominations for secretary? Seeing none, we'll say by unanimous consent that the nominations for that position are closed. Any discussion? I guess I should have offered discussion in the last one too. Any discussion? Seeing none, roll call, Ms. Shepherd.
Elturk.
Yes.
Hart.
Yes.
Ibrahim.
Yes.
Latash.
Yes.
O'Donnell.
Yes.
Dookie.
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shepherd. With 7 yes votes, Jackie Hart will serve as the secretary for the Board of Education for this year, which brings us to request D, the role of treasurer for the Ferndale Public Schools Board of Education. Is there a nomination for the role of treasurer?
Um, I'd like to nominate Jen Latosh again.
I second that.
Are there any other nominations for treasurer for the Board of Education? All right, seeing none, we will, by unanimous consent, close that, the nominations. And is there any discussion? I would just like to note, frequently or typically the secretary and the treasurer turn over from year to year. And I just, support Jen to continue to be treasurer for a consecutive year, just because I appreciate her legal eye, and I think it's good for continuity in that role as we move forward in the bond process. So I support her for that position. Seeing no further discussion, roll call, Ms. Shepherd?
Hart,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Latosh,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Dookie,
Yes.
Elturk,
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With 7 yes votes, Jen Latosh will serve as the treasurer of the Board of Education for this school year. That brings us to item 4.2, the board meeting dates and times for the coming year. So I think the board has had the opportunity to review these dates and times, and they're ordinarily the third Monday of each month for these regular board meetings that are listed at 7 p.m. on each of those Mondays. And we have an adjustment for the month of January because of Martin Luther King Day, correct?
That's correct. And then again in February due to the break.
And in February due to the break as well. Is there any discussion about the dates and times? Is there a motion to approve the dates and times for our meetings for 2021?
What's the adjustment? So for the January and February, are we moving them a week later?
So they're a week later, yes. In January, it'll be on January 25th. And in February, it'll be on February 22nd.
Thanks.
Yes. Is there a motion to approve the meeting dates and times for 2021?
I'll move.
Moved by Jen
Second.
and seconded by Jim. Roll call, Ms. Shepherd?
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Latosh,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Dookie,
Yes.
Elturk,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item 4.3, the designation of individuals to assume specified responsibilities of the treasurer and secretary of the board. This is, hold on. So each year, the Board of Education has, we receive a great deal of support in our roles, particularly the roles of treasurer and secretary. And this agenda item is for the purpose of authorizing the Assistant Superintendent of Finance for the school district to perform the day-to-day functions of the treasurer of the board as outlined in 0171.4. And request B is the authorization to designate the superintendent's executive assistant to serve as clerk at meetings of the board and record the minutes of the board meetings as identified by bylaw 0171.3A. Is there any discussion about that item? Those items?
No, I move that we approve requests A and B as stated in the meeting material.
I second.
Moved by Jim and seconded by Jackie. Roll call, Ms. Shepherd?
Latosh,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Dookie,
Yes.
Elturk,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With 7 yes votes, those authorizations are approved. That moves us to agenda item 4.4. The approval to authorize bond for the treasurer of the board. So this request is the approval of a $25,000 bond for the treasurer of the board as provided in section 0154C of the bylaws of the board. Is there a motion to approve this request, or is there discussion first? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the request?
I move.
Second.
Moved by
Thank you.
Jackie and seconded by Sandra. Roll call, Ms. Shepherd?
O'Donnell,
Yes.
Dookie,
Yes.
Elturk,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Latosh,
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With 7 yes votes, the request to approve the bond for the treasurer of the board is approved. That takes us to agenda item 4.5, the appointment of board members to board committees and other assignments. So this is, there's a number of assignments, and the board president typically just typically which I've done this as well this year. I've gone through the the committees and assignments, and have people that I'd like to nominate for each. And we won't do a roll call. We'll just do as long as the board is okay with it, we'll just do a roll call at the end of the whole thing rather than after each request. For agenda item 4.5. So the first request A, is the approval to designate a board member and an alternate to be the legislative liaison. Oh, let me say this too before I get started in this. These are roles that that each person sort of undertakes it as they see fit within their role as a school board member. And if you have any, if I appoint you to one of these, I welcome any questions. You can follow up with me with questions about what it means, because I'm not gonna give a lot of detail about each one. I will say that the board committees, the first set here, requests A, B, C, and D, are for the Michigan Association of School Boards. The second one's for the National School Board Association. The third and the fourth are both for Oakland County Schools. And then after that, requests E through J, or almost relatively, all these committees of the board has a committee of the whole, has a committee of the whole format that we follow. So we meet as an entire board each month to go over various aspects. So while these committees remain, and I will nominate a person to be the lead on each, or I will nominate 2 people for each of those committees. Ordinarily, those committees never meet individually. We only do this in case one of those committees had to meet individually. But in my last, I'm not sure that that's happened in the last couple of years at all. So that being said, I will nominate people, or I will ask people to serve in those roles. But know that typically those committees don't meet separate from the committee of the whole. So I'll start out with the request A, and this is to be the legislative liaison to the Michigan Association of School Boards. I'd like to, or I'm going to ask Sandra to be the lead, the designated legislative liaison, and ask Sarah L. Turk to be the alternate to that. For request B, the designation of a board member as the legislative liaison to the oh, and I encourage you to write this down, although in the minutes. Request B, the person designated as the legislative liaison to the National School Board Association. I'd like to have Sarah be that person, the legislative liaison, and have Jen be the alternate. Request C, representative to the Oakland County School Board Association. I would like to have Anna be the representative and Jim be the alternate. Request D, I would like to, this is for the legislative, the board member designated as the legislative liaison to the Oakland County School Board Association. I'd like to ask Jen to be that person and Jackie to be the alternate. Request E, now we're getting into the committee assignments within our board. This is to be the on the board sustainability committee. I'd like to ask Jim to be the chair of that committee and ask Jen to be on that committee as well. Request F. This is to be on the board achievement committee. I would like to ask Sarah to be the chair of that committee, and I myself be on that committee as well. Mike Davison. Request G. I'd like to, this is the board governance committee. So ordinarily the board president and I believe the vice president and one other board member, 3 people serve on this committee. So I would like myself, Mike Davison, and Sandra Dukey and Anna Ibrahim to be designated as the governance committee. Request H, is the delegate to the Head Start committee. And I would like to ask Anna to be the delegate to the Head Start committee and ask Jackie to be the alternate. Request I, the approval of, or this is board members to the diversity committee. I would like to ask Sandra and Anna to be board members that are going to be working with the diversity committee. Request J, the marketing committee for the board. I would like to ask Jackie to be the chair of that and Jim to be on that committee as well. And request K, which is the board members that work with the Student Representative Advisors Committee. I would like to ask Sandra to be the chair and ask Sarah to serve on that committee as well. Kim, did you get all that? Okay. Does anybody have is there discussion about these appointments?
Just a question on Head Start for Danya. Will Head Start, the Head Start committee be meeting once things get rolling again?
Yes, yeah, it will.
You.
I think there's a prescribed number of meetings they have to have per the grant, and we'll be sure to have those, yes.
Okay. Not that I'm on that committee, I just wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
No, they do. They meet regularly.
Okay, good.
Well, like I said, I'm welcome. If you're in a new seat, you can follow up with me or with the person that was in that position last year to ask any questions about what it entails. Is there a motion to approve these appointments?
I just had one other question. Who did you designate as OCSBA representative?
The representative is Anna and yourself, Jim, as the alternate.
Oh, okay. So if those meetings are supposed to be on Wednesday, I can't do a Wednesday evening meeting.
Okay. Is there somebody else that would like to volunteer to be the alternate representative?
I'll volunteer as the alternate.
All right, thank you, Sarah.
No problem.
Any other questions or conflicts? Is there a motion to approve these appointments?
I'll move.
Moved by Jen, and is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Jackie. Roll call, Ms. Shepherd?
Dookie,
Yes.
Eltert,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Ibrahim,
Yes.
Latosh,
Yes.
O'Donnell,
Yes.
President Davison.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. With 7 yes votes, those appointments are approved. That brings us to agenda item 4.6, the return to in-person learning planning. This will not be a voting item. This is just a discussion.
Yes, thanks, Mike. So as we know, the original plan was approved through the end of second semester in terms of providing virtual learning due to the COVID-19 pandemic. We're at a point now where we have to start the discussions of an eventual return to in-person learning for our students. When that exactly is, how that exactly looks is something that we need to really work through at this point. We've started the conversations prior to break in terms of how it might look dependent on the numbers. Obviously, the county is still in a level E status, but we also have news that the vaccine is being rolled out. With educators being in phase 1B of the rollout, the hope is that we'll have access to the vaccine sometime in March. Hopefully, if things continue to move in the manner that they're currently working in. The difficulty is the balance of meeting the needs of our community. We have a plan, kind of not, again, we have ideas and options for the board to consider and to help provide us some direction in how we look at it. One thing that I will point out is that the metric that we're currently using has us where we have to be in sustained level C for 3 weeks. The way the county is classifying us as level A, B, C, D, E makes it very difficult to be at a sustained level C. Whereas the governor recently, over break, announced that 9-12 buildings can return to in-person learning. There's a little bit of conflict between how Oakland County is rating it versus how the governor is requesting schools go back to school. Again, not an easy discussion. Obviously, student and staff safety is at the heart of our decision-making process, but we also now, we're closing in just about a year of students not being in person learning, and there's opportunity loss as a result of that. That's reality. That the gaps that we've seen will only be compounded the longer we're out of school. With that being said, I know that the Board of Education or myself or the administration are going to recommend going back when we believe it to be unsafe. There's also a lot of research out of Michigan State University and other institutions that show low spreading among schools. That at the lower levels, they're really seeing minimal exposure. We're actually seeing more people being exposed to the virus when they're out of school rather than when they're in school, which adds to the further complexity. Now, this is something that we have to approach with caution, with care, and really meet the needs of our community. We have a survey also that we'll be going through that includes staff, student, and family feedback with comfort level of coming back to school sometime within the second semester. Again, the date we don't know yet. That will be determined by the Board of Education. We have recommendations and ideas, but ultimately we say how long from when a board vote occurs to when we can implement a model that we feel will get students back into school to some extent while also minimizing risk exposure. So we're going to go over the data, go over some initial thinking, initial options to start moving the ball in this discussion. I do believe that many schools are going to consider returning to some sort of in-person learning, whether it be a hybrid, an AB cohort, starting second semester. So this is kind of where we're at. It really is. There's difficulty because we understand people's concern, but we also understand the loss that we're facing by continuing to have students out of school. One other thing I want to point out is that we started the school year with a schedule that worked well for our families, and then we increased the synchronous time on Fridays, which again, we did that as we're increasing our stamina of online learning and still within appropriate times online for children. As we head into second semester, we know through our progress monitoring tools like NWA and others that students are starting to fall behind. And so what are we going to do to address students who need that extra support within the school day? So all of that is kind of shaping the idea, but as Johanna Marekna is going to go through the plan, and basically this is kind of, we're going to give options, but obviously we're going to give one option that we feel more strongly towards at this point. This is where then we will discuss this again at the January 11th Committee of the Whole, and then have meetings with various stakeholders this week to further, solidify our thinking. But in all honesty, and this is where I'm going to be honest with the community, staff, the board, we really need to find a path to get students back in school. And I really do believe that the board has to think about the metric that we are using and thinking how the vaccine impacts that metric. Does it change things? Does it allow us to make different considerations? Again, I believe that we've, up until this point, have done the best we could. I fully believe in what we've done up until this point. I believe we have saved lives. I believe we have kept kids and staff safe. But at this point, now we have more information. We have more research at our disposal. I really believe we need to find a path to some extent to get our students back into the classroom for in-person learning. So with that, I'm going to share my screen and have Johanna take us through our preliminary ideas.
Good evening, everyone. So the plan is lengthy. So I'm thinking that probably the best way is just interrupt me whenever you see fit to ask questions. Does that seem amenable to everyone as we go through? I think saving questions till the end will be chaotic. So feel free to just interrupt whenever, and I'll do my best to answer them. So what you see here is, and what was shared in the packet is a draft plan. It's where we are right now after our initial set of meetings right before break with administrators, with teachers. So we can go to the first page of text, which I believe is page 4, the overview. So the bulleted points on this, and I won't spend time reading it since you have this, but what we really wanted to be sure is that we're able to continue at this point to provide rich opportunities for families and selections, choices for them that will allow them to have a robust synchronous virtual experience, but also a robust in-person experience, and that we have equitable opportunities for families that choose either of those. So that was really at the core of looking at this plan. We've looked at plans from several surrounding districts that have already returned in person at various times, and a lot of them didn't really meet the needs that our community has identified in Ferndale. So this one you'll see has some differences, and we'll go through them.
Miss
Okay.
Maragna?
Yep.
On that point, can I just ask, are you, and is the suggestion the robust synchronous as well as I guess robust in-person option, would those be with the same teachers?
So that's the unique part about our plan, is that our plan, unlike some of our surrounding districts, would allow every child to stay with their current teacher, which based on the feedback from the community was really important for parents and students. So what you'll see is that every student will be able to stay with their teacher. Okay, so we can move on to the next page. So this was sort of some of the logic and our planning goals. So we wanted to create that equity of experience between families who are choosing to return and families who want to remain virtual. We wanted to keep students with their teachers at the elementary level and keep them with the same schedule that they have at the secondary level. We wanted to provide flexibilities for families between our options. Many districts around us have forced students to choose an option, and then they're stuck with that option even if circumstances change. We believe that the plan that we've developed allows for more flexibility, which I'll explain as we go through this as well. And then we also wanted to allow for multiple return selection windows so that as families' needs change, they would have that flexibility to return throughout the semester rather than in discrete selection timeframes, which we have seen in other plans. So those were sort of the guiding principles of the return planning. On the next page, these are our results. This is our process. So we started by surveying the community, the staff, and students. And the link right there, if you wouldn't mind clicking on the link for the results. Yep. This is our data, and this is sort of what we collected. So first, our student response. Would our students want to return to in-person learning? They said yes. I will note that our student response numbers were not super high, and they were skewed, obviously, towards students who are able to take a return survey. Our kindergartners are not answering questions like this, even though it's sent to all of our email addresses. So that's just a no, but around 40% no, 60% yes. Our second student data point was that they would prefer by a slight margin to return in person full-time. So 55% in person full-time and 45% approximately hybrid. So that was from our students. And then you can see who answered the survey. We have a few from FECC, who I'm not sure exactly how those were taken. Maybe parents helped. Who knows? A few from lower, a few from upper, but significant amounts from our secondary students. Okay. Next, we have showing our group breakdown, so you can see by reported ethnicity who was responding. On our next slide,
I apologize. I'm having to admit people from the waiting room and it pauses my
no problem.
computer, so. All right.
Okay, so these were our staff response. Would our staff want to return to in-person instruction? And the conditions of the metric were met. 72% said yes, about a quarter said no. And this is a breakdown of who responded. The way that that Google Forms shows the data, it doesn't have every single one listed on the side, but you can see that the majority of people who answered were teachers from our teaching staff. So 176 responses, around 50% of them teachers, and then all those other ones are from individual other work groups within the district. In terms of what the staff would prefer, they prefer a hybrid option for returning by 70 to 30 margin. And then in terms of the age of our staff who responded, you can see this is a breakdown. This is percentage-wise, matches fairly well with our staff's age breakdown. Finally, you can see the racial or ethnic groups with which they identify the staff who responded. And I think that's our last staff data point. Now our family response data is pretty closely aligned. They're all fairly closely aligned, within 10%. 60% said that they would allow their students to return. And you can see we had a high number of responses. For a district our size, a statistically relevant amount of responses is around 600. And we had 910 responses. So we had a great response rate for this.
Just a question on that data, on data point number 1. In terms of the survey, what did they, at this point in the survey, had the metric that's referred to in the question been defined?
Yes.
Okay.
We included a link to the metric as well in the survey.
Okay, got it.
We had a nice representation from all of our schools in the district, as you can see here in this chart. And then these are based on the different demographics, special ed, different buildings. These are the types of responses that we received about returning to either full-time or hybrid. And basically the trend was that the older the students got, the more likely that parents were to respond that they wanted them to go in hybrid.
No, do dishes, please. Okay.
All right. Next slide. So these are the ethnicity reported by parent and guardian who filled out the survey, or 910 responses. Okay, next slide. And then this is our ethnicity by district. So there is a discrepancy between who responded and ethnicity in the district as a whole, which you can see on these 2 slides. So then what we did was we took, our principals called everyone who had not responded. So we got a lot more responses after that, but not all of them. So on the next slide, we looked at by building what that looked like for parent and guardian. Student ethnicity is reported by the parent and guardian. So you can see what that looks like for each building in the district. Then we took that data for the next slide, and we looked at the student ethnicity by the district. So the data that we have in MyStar. And then we looked at who would allow their student to return to in-person learning if the metrics are met by that ethnicity. And you can see that in the red and green bars here. So you can see who would allow their students to return and who would not allow their students to return based on ethnicity. Okay. And again, broken down by building. So each individual building, you'll be able to see returning and not returning, who would allow their students to return by ethnicity. And then finally, we use some projection modeling to model for the people who did not return the survey. Would they return or would they not return? So we use some statistical modeling to basically make a projection, because we know we didn't have our 3,000 students responses, but we use the data that we do have to project and model who would come back based on ethnicity, to make sure that we had a representative sample as we started to develop the plan. So are there any questions on the data?
Just going to add that this slide was really important as we look at equity. As you notice on this particular slide, families who identified as white, 71 to close to 30%, really willing to send their student back to school, where more people with no who identify as Black. And so looking at this data really guide a lot of our decision making, and really trying to ensure that we were able to continue with a robust virtual option, even if we return to in-person learning. So it's basically allowing people to continue as is if they so choose, but also allowing for in-person learning if a family so chooses. So this will facilitate both, rather than saying, if you go online, it's fully asynchronous, you'll have a teacher of record for two-way communication, and we'll see you next year. So this data was very helpful in kind of shaping the plan that we'll get more into.
Okay, so back to our process after that lengthy diversion, but important diversion. Then we met with students. We met with some secondary students to provide feedback on what a return model would look like. We had a initial concept development without any times or any details, just sort of a concept that we could go and collect some information on. So we had an administrative team concept review that also included the FEA president. And during that meeting, there was a request for the FEA team, for an FEA team to have additional input. So then we met with an FEA team who provided some input on that initial concept as well. After that, we developed a plan, which you will see tonight. And we are currently at step 7 for board review and input. And then after this, we have another meeting scheduled with the FEA for additional input. Now that when we met with them, we just had the concept developed, not the full plan. So now that we have a plan, we'll go back for revisions with the FEA on Wednesday this week. After that, there will be potential plan revisions depending on how that meeting goes. And then we'd look for board review and a vote at some point. So that's the process that we've utilized. So here's that timeline of what we've done. December 10th, we started with that concept input meeting. We had a meeting with the students on December 11th. The FEA concept meeting on December 14th. We fully developed the document that you see here between December 14th and January 4th. It was actually changed even up until today. Keep working on it. There was a preliminary plan review with our administrators on December 17th. Right now, we're having that same preliminary plan review with the board. And then we will have on Wednesday a meeting with FEA to look at potential tweaks to the plan. So in terms of the ongoing timeline, whatever day the board directs as day one would be the day that the board votes to adopt the new plan. And we would need approximately 21 days to, so 3 weeks to implement the plan. That would allow us time to have the family selection window open, to have staff communication, close that window for family choices, have buildings contact and secure selections from non-responding families, and then eventually the return to in-person learning would begin. Monthly, we would have switch options for new start mode dates. So every month, families would have the option to change if they needed to. A couple notes to that. If a family selects an in-person selection, that is a final selection, unless they need to quarantine. So for in-person students, we'll make some exceptions for those. And then for special education students, we'll work with their IEPs, 504 plans. All right, so in terms of the concept, FECC, we have a proposed hybrid schedule for FECC in keeping in line with having a pre-K through 12 option that is similar. If you click on the link for the FECC proposed hybrid schedule, it will take you to a draft plan. And you can see that here, it's the concepts for developing were the same, but it kind of builds on the mini days, the mini sessions that have already been occurring. So you'll see that there's large group instruction time, in-person learning, small group instruction time, and then there's also further down in the plan, seesaw or online activities for students who are not in the in-person as well. So this is an overview of what a hybrid plan at FECC would look like. Now for elementary, the concept is basically, and we're not the only district using these terms, but roomies are students who are in the rooms, and Zoomies are students who are virtual, just so that we all have the same lingo. It just makes it easier to use a noun in a lot of the discussions. So the concept is that students who select to be roomies would be with their teachers in the morning. And during that same time, Zoomies would be doing virtual specials or essentials and asynchronous work. And then in the afternoon, we'd have the flip. The teacher would now spend the time with the Zoomies, and the roomies who were there in the morning would now be doing virtual essentials and their asynchronous work. By doing it this way, we allow every student to keep their teacher. And that is something that is unique in the plans that we have seen in the surrounding areas. No student would lose their teacher, and the teachers would get to maintain their same students who they've worked with all year. And at the elementary level, that is so relationships based, it's really important, especially during a traumatic year like this, that students and teachers get to stay together. So that was one of the main things that we wanted to accomplish.
May I ask
Can I ask a Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
Oh, this is Amber.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm on as my daughter, sorry. So does that mean if they came back in school, the roomies would only be in school a half day and then would come home and do their computer work at home?
Amber, I'm sorry. I can't see you because I just accidentally closed the screen. I'm sorry that this is not public comment.
Oh, and she's gonna ask a question. Sorry. Okay.
No, but please, anybody that has questions that aren't clear, please email the board, and either us or the staff will be sure to respond to your questions of clarity.
Hey, Mike, this is Jen. I actually had the exact same question that Amber had.
Go
So
ahead.
I'll just ask, do the kids go home in the afternoon, or is it similar to the learning labs that we have now?
So for students who select to be roomies, they would go home at lunchtime, except we are able to staff learning labs for any of the students who have already been using learning labs in the fall and for our special education students. So for families that have already been using those learning labs, we would have a PM session, as well as for our special education students and students who receive special services like speech therapy, occupational therapy, etc. Does that answer the question? And they would take their lunch with them.
Yeah, thank
we'll
you.
provide lunches. Okay.
So, yeah, just as we look at this over the next week, I think it would be important with this option to try to expand the learning labs, because I think the families that need in person, not just for the academics, but for the social and emotional connections that are in school, I think it would be important to, have some way to allow them to remain in school for the school day.
So one of the options that we have looked at is latchkey, or our school-age childcare. And the licensing requirements for that are very, very strict. But our goal would be to expand as we can figure out the staffing. The staffing is definitely difficult. We just don't have a huge staff in Ferndale. So at the beginning, we know we can accommodate the students who have already been attending, plus our special ed students, but the goal would be to increase that accommodation.
Yeah, that becomes the issue. If you're running it as a daycare, we have to be careful with the licensing, because we're not a registered daycare in terms of certain age requirements and certain requirements in the building. And then to have learning labs, again, it's a complexity, because it's not that it's asynchronous time in the afternoon. All of our staff will still be working with the other half of the students. This is what will allow for some social distancing and minimizing having 500 students in a building at a particular time. And we can certainly expand it to a certain extent, that's for sure. But again, there's staffing limitations, because parapros are now going to be working with students in person. And then when it flips, they'll be working again with teachers and staff in various ways. So I do think we can expand it. We just have to be careful of, if we're running it as a daycare, we wouldn't meet the license requirements for that.
Yeah, well, and I would want to run it
Yes.
necessarily as a daycare, but then I guess the next thing I would be looking for, and maybe it'll be covered later tonight or in next week, would be what the phase out from this would be, how that would look, because the next thing I would be looking for would be an expansion of this. There has to be at some point when people select to opt in to in person as we go along. this model won't be sustainable because there'll be too many people who just want regular school at that point.
Yeah, we have considered that, and I think we're not 100% done because we need a little bit more of statistical modeling for it. But it looks to be like that tipping point is around 75% of students being roomies. Once we have 75% of students being roomies, at that point we look to shift our remaining Zoomies potentially to new teachers near the end of the year.
Okay.
And that will be fluid depending on how those monthly selections go, but we do have a plan-ish in place for that. Partially, it depends on what families select. Because I think what you're getting at is at some point the teacher is spending 50% of their time with 24 students and 50% of their time with 3 or 4 students. And at that point, we need to look at moving further towards regular school.
Right.
So we have considered that.
Yeah, and I was also thinking of that as an indication of, well, really community sentiment and what the community is demanding in terms of actually, where they're placing their students.
Correct. So underneath, you'll see the detail. And this is with sample timing. We do have different staggered start times for our elementary schools because of busing. So in order to make this document only 30 pages or whatever it is, instead of 80 pages, we just have one sample schedule. But we would, once the board agrees on the plan, we would make individualized community-facing documents that have the exact start and stop times for every school, like we always do, so that schools, individual school communities are receiving exact start and stop times. So in terms of a sample, you'll see here that roomies would go in the morning, and then there would be lunch and prep time for our teachers stacked in the middle of the day. And then Zoomies would be live with their teachers virtually in the afternoon. And the flip of each of those would be that they were having their virtual essentials as well as asynchronous work during the opposite time frame from whatever selection the family had made. So are there any questions about that? All right, at the secondary level, we have 2 concepts, and we just kind of wanted to show the difference between the concept that we believe is best and the concept that we've seen in other districts. So concept A is the concept that we believe is best, and when we asked our teachers at the secondary level and our union president, they agreed that concept A was better for our students for many reasons, from an equity standpoint, from a continuity of learning standpoint, from many standpoints. So the concept that you see here in A is that roomies are in person on Mondays and Zoomies have asynchronous work. On Tuesdays, we have the opposite. So Zoomies are live with their teachers virtually and roomies have their asynchronous work that day. On Wednesday, we would have all of the students be in joint live virtual sessions. And then on Thursdays, we would have roomies in person again, Zoomies asynchronous, and the flip-flop on Friday. So what you see here and in the elementary plan is whether you pick to be a roomie or a Zoomie, you are getting the exact same amount of FaceTime, of live FaceTime with your teacher. So if you are a roomie, you would get Monday, Wednesday, Thursday with your teacher, FaceTime. And if you were a Zoomie, you'd get Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday. So everyone gets 3 full days. And at the elementary level, everyone gets 5 half days. The times that you see These are the FHS times. It'd be minus 10 minutes for UHS. Again, saving time in the document, but we will make public facing documents, community facing documents. One of the pieces of feedback that we did receive from our teachers was that there would need to be some time for doing cleaning as the students changed classrooms. So we did allow for some additional time added to our passing time to allow for that cleaning, to wipe down desks, doorknobs as students are changing. And so you can see that in the yellow blocks with the passing times. So that is an overview of concept A.
Real quick, the cleaning time too, that's for students wiping down their desks, and then for a teacher to do like high touch, like you're talking doorknobs, light switches, that type of stuff?
Well, we will have ABM in the building doing sanitization of high touch point surfaces on a rotating basis. Within classrooms, we'll leave that autonomy to teachers to determine how they want to manage their classroom procedures. But we will provide all of the cleaning supplies for every classroom. So some teachers may want to just wipe them all down themselves. I suspect many will. We have lots of very
also
quick
age
teachers.
dependent.
And
If you have a
it
first
depends on
grade
the-
student, you might not,
Right.
you know, or a sixth grader or 12th grader. It's really going to be up to the teacher and how they want to handle that.
Okay. So then we'll keep going. So concept B is what we've seen in a lot of other districts. So we did want to present the option to the board. And concept B basically works on a rotating A-B cohort schedule. So there's an A week and then a B week. So 1 week kids go Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The next week they go Tuesday, Thursday for in-person. But this would require us to take all of our Zoomies and push them into a virtual academy where we would not be able to offer synchronous instruction. So we just wanted to sort of highlight the issues with some of, because we've had lots of questions, well, why can't we do cohorts and A-B days? Well, the reason that we don't feel that it's a great fit for our district and our data and our equity goals is that we would disenfranchise a large portion of our students. And as you saw in the data earlier that Danya discussed, those students are students of color, and we would force them into an asynchronous model without their teachers. So we have this here just to sort of show what the common plan is, but we truly believe that option A is a better option for our students. Again, those details are listed here. And they're similar to the first one. There's that cleaning time at the secondary level. And then you can see for this that would we'd have cohort C would be that fully asynchronous E2020 platform. Are there any questions about the schedules? Okay.
So I don't have a question about the schedule, but I do have a question about, I know this is not the, concept B is not the, right now, the top concept, but this cohort C that says this E2020, that means that the curriculum is not comparable to what the kids are getting in class, right?
Well, E2020 is an approved curriculum in the district, and we do use it for a variety of courses, but they would not have that synchronous teacher component. And for the development team, it really felt like that was really a deal breaker for our students who would select to be Zoomies. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, Sandra, you're correct. We generally use it for credit recovery. We don't use it as the means of.
Well, we use it some for students who are looking to get ahead as well and just can't fit the course in their schedule. So sometimes they'll take, they want to take a class, but they just can't do it. So because they're already taking 7 classes, they don't want to drop anything. So sometimes we offer a merit option, but we use it for credit recovery as well. It is approved curriculum. Is it as good as our teachers? No. Okay. So for learning labs, we would open PM learning labs for virtual specials and asynchronous instruction for AM special education students and students who regularly attended the fall learning labs. We would not need AM learning labs because students who want to be in learning labs would be in their classrooms with their teachers. So those would be PM. For secondary, we would open those learning labs on virtual instruction days. Students with an IEP or who need the learning lab to access virtual instruction would be able to attend. Similar to how it is now. The students who are attending now for learning labs would still be able to attend those learning labs on the virtual days. Our locations would be by building like they are now. Our functions and descriptions have not changed. We would continue to look at the student expectations from our code of conduct. And for special education, you can see sort of a breakdown of what this would look like for FECC. The special education programs and services would operate on a full in-person schedule. Students who are not able to attend due to medical risks or needs, the IEP would be changed to match those needs for those students. We would be able to include virtual and remote instruction related to support services for students, families who elect to be virtual. Same for lower and upper. They would be elementary self-contained programs. There would be an option for a 5-day per week in-person schedule or a full virtual schedule. The in-person K-5 self-contained program would be located at Fuel, and the inclusion and general education participation would be provided via in-person or virtual education, and that would be based on the students' IEPs. For secondary and adult transition, similarly, we would be able to follow the same schedule as for the general education students. Resource lab instruction, which provides Tuesdays and Thursdays, would not be possible. That would be discontinued. However, it would be switched out for actual in-person learning on those roomy days. And then for in-person secondary self-contained programs, which are ASD and CI programs, in the adult transition program, it would increase from 2 days per week to 3 days per week in person, and then the 2 days would be virtual. In-person instructional time may increase to 5 days per week if it's possible, and that would be based on students' medical and health needs. And we just sort of based on, like Jim was saying earlier, how many students elect to return. And we would still be able to provide all of the ancillary services, either virtually or in person, depending on what families select. We'd staff like we are now with non-instructional ancillary staff. Transportation, similarly to now, would be provided. Lunch would be individually packaged meals so that we avoid crowding in the lunch line. Same processes for cleaning, same processes for following COVID cases. We follow the Oakland County protocols for reporting those. And that the staff will complete a daily COVID-19 health screener, which the staff who's coming in is currently doing that. They're on QR codes by the door. All right. For virtual instruction, the way that the virtual instruction is completed would be very similar to how it is now on Google Meets. Same thing with using Journeys and Vision, IXL, all of our login programs. What would change is the times at which students are logging in. So for those elementary students who select to be Zoomies, their times would be those PM with their main teacher, and AM for their essentials. And then for secondary students, instead of having 5 days of logging in, they would have their Zoomie days, and they'd log in on a different schedule. And that's one of the things that we really have talked about a lot, is hoping that we can have sort of a standard start and not have to continue to make time changes. But if we want to go and look at a later start to this plan, we would need to look at changing that synchronous schedule if we stay virtual. So that's just another thing to think about as we move forward. Same thing with our attendance. For the virtual students, we'll continue to use the two-way communication. We'll continue for all of our students to use the FPS Student Code of Conduct. And we'll continue using virtual restorative practices with our RP coaches for incidents. All right. For extracurriculars, we will follow the MHSAA guidance. And then clubs and organizations will follow the same guidelines as return to in-person learning. So group advisors will operate to include both the in-person and the virtual students, so that everyone has a chance to participate. And then for outside groups like Playworks, they'll follow those building times, those individual building times, like they always have. And the principals will work with those outside groups on those schedules. In terms of safety precautions, we will be requiring masks except when eating. Those masks will cover the nose and the mouth, except for students who are not able medically to tolerate a mask, or some of our special education students. Students will be required to bring water bottles. We currently have all the water fountains capped, so only the bottle fillers are currently working. We have purchased bottles because we know students may come to school without one, so we have purchased bottles for those. And for our younger students, we will model how to drink out of the water bottle by pushing up the mask, drinking, and continuing to keep the mask in place. We will have hand washing protocols where our students regularly wash their hands, hand sanitizer in every classroom and also in our hallways. We have purchased individual desks for all of our classrooms that did not have individual desks, so that we don't have students sitting at the same table. We will stagger lunches, recess, and play times to maintain those groups of students. The parents, family members, and other visitors to the school will be minimized to the greatest extent possible. Usually we have lots of volunteers and parents and people in buildings, but we will reduce that for now to reduce the number of adults in the buildings. All of our food service will be prepackaged individual lunches so that we don't have crowding in the lunch lines, and so that we can deliver those to locations as necessary. All high-touch surfaces will be disinfected. We have ordered signage that directs students to engage in safe practices, where to stand, dots on the floor, how to wash hands, good practices for washing hands, how to wear a mask, those types of signage. We will also have, particularly at the elementary level, also at the secondary level, modeling safe practices. We will teach those, we will model those, and we will practice those. And we do still have a dedicated public health nurse who helps us with contact tracing and quarantine recommendations. She's provided from Oakland County. On the playground, we will help children engage in physical activity through safe activities. We've seen some of those activities with Playworks and with some of our pop-up opportunities that were happening earlier in the semester, ensuring that students and staff wash their hands before and after outdoor playground time, talk with children about their behaviors, allow for physical distancing when possible, keep groups of kids from the same classroom together on the playground, and there's options for that, whether we put down lines or teachers keep their students with them, stagger times, etc. We will limit the size of groups participating in the playground simultaneously and require masks. The district will not be able to ensure that students are socially distanced, but we will make all possible efforts to do that. And in fact, in the Safe Schools Return Plan, it's not a requirement. And the distance at schools is 3 feet, not 6 feet. They will eat with their cohorts for lunch, so we'll keep all the kids together at lunch. So groups in the same area of the cafeteria will try to, as much as we can, social distance during lunch and on those district buses. In terms of our family commitments, we will ask families to do a daily health screening and report if there's an issue, and follow guidance from our district's public health nurse regarding self-quarantine and practices for those exposures. One of the things that our plan really allows for is if we have a family who has an exposure, it's really no problem. They're with the same teacher. They can switch from being a roomie to being a Zoomie, continue to keep their teacher, continue to receive the same instruction. And then when that quarantine period is over, again, they would be able to return with their same teacher, not having missed a beat. And that's something that's, I think, unique in the plan that we're presenting. Instead of having a student leave school for a week or whatever the quarantine recommendation is and then have to make up work, they'll actually be able to continue to work with their teacher virtually, elementary or secondary. Okay. If we'll keep going to the next page. So quarantine will follow the protocols from the county. A substitute will be provided if a teacher needs to quarantine. And then additional safety measures you'll see underneath for our buses. We've mounted hand sanitizer in the step wells. We've purchased a plethora of PPE, masks and face shields and desk shields. So we have lots and lots of PPE, and we continue to purchase that and add to our stores. All right, if we keep going down, for pupil accounting, for our roomies, we'll have normal MyStar daily attendance process, and then for Zoomies, we'll continue to use the two-way communication requirements that count as a student having attended. And our teachers are great at putting those in. They're very practiced. That's how they've been doing things the whole semester. So it's been working well. In terms of transportation, again, we will require masks, require hand sanitizer. We'll have students fill the seats 1 seat at a time until there are no seats remaining. If the weather is reasonable, the bus drivers will keep those windows open, and when they're driving and when they're stopped. We will disinfect buses after every departure. And to the extent feasible, for those students who are medically fragile and cannot wear a mask, we will work with their IEPs for those to minimize risk. All right. So I think that takes us to the end of the concepts. Can I answer any questions?
So I know we provided a lot of information right now, and obviously this is something that we'll continue to discuss with staff throughout this week, and then revisit with the board again on January 11th on Monday. So I urge any family or teachers or anyone, if you have questions, clarifications, just send myself and Johanna an email, and we'll certainly connect with you to make sure that we answer any questions, the preliminary questions you have. There'll also be a time though on the 11th for people to speak on the matter as well during public comment. So I know we threw a lot of information, but we just coming off of break, we wanted to make sure to at least take a deep dive into the discussion and provide the board and the community our thinking at this point in time.
I actually had a couple of questions that may take some time to, to get the answers, because one is totally out of the district's control. But on the subject of vaccinations, I know supply is an issue, but is there a timeline is there a timeline to come up with a plan to vaccinate education staff? And then second, have you heard any definition of which staff would be covered? For instance, bus drivers, secretaries, people like that.
So the plan, we're waiting for Oakland County Health Department to give us the dates, and they will, similarly to how hospitals have run their plans, Oakland County will run the same thing for school employees. And we don't have exact dates yet, but we are in 1B. So that's right now they're in 1A. I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer, but
okay. Yeah,
it's not actually us who runs it.
Right. I was assuming that would be the answer and that you had no control over it. So
unfortunately not. And one thing that I did want to just go back to in the plan is for the secondary, we presented A and B just to show two options. But to Sandra's point, and I think it's very important to note, we really feel like A is the right way to go. We've seen a lot of districts doing something similar to B, where they push students into an online academy. But for a district our size, we won't be able to provide the same type of curriculum or teacher interaction if we go that route. So while it's in the document, it's really not in the best interest of our students.
that makes sense. And then another question is, I was looking at a study today, but I think it came out in November or December, that showed the MMR vaccine, or MMR2 vaccine, which is the more recent one, which is measles, mumps, and rubella, has some protective effect for COVID. So I wondered if you wanted to gently inquire with the county health department on any recommendations that they had for boosters for the MMR2 vaccine for adults who might want to gain that benefit.
Could you send me that article, Jim?
Yeah,
and I'll
will.
follow up with Rudy Hobbs from Oakland County, who's been assisting us with that type of information through the health department.
Okay. And then my last question, when would the forum be for board members to sort of express their initial thoughts on return to school, other than questions? At the committee of the whole meeting next week?
Yeah.
Okay.
For now,
Yeah,
have some.
You could say it now if you'd like, but we figured we wanted to, we kind of jumped on the annual organization meeting so that it would give time for people to think about it. And then ultimately the board will dictate how long the discussions last, in terms of asking questions, asking us to go back to make adjustments. So on the 11th, it just, as we said, the timeline from when a board vote to implementation is roughly about 3 weeks. So that's why we're not coming to you with a specific date recommendation. Would like it sometime in February, but we also want to make sure that we go through the process and give the board the time to give this the thought that it needs.
Yeah, and I was asking that because I'm more curious about what other board members think rather than wanting to. I mean, I think my views are kind of well known.
Danya, you were talking about, well, I noted that the survey data was based on whether students and families and teachers would be comfortable returning with the metric. And, you mentioned at the outset that you have some thoughts about possibly with the vaccine, whether we would revisit metric. I suppose that's a thought and that's still in process for you, and something for us to consider as well.
Yes, yeah. I mean, for me, it definitely does change my perspective a little bit, and that as the vaccine continues to roll out, things will hopefully continue to get better and better. We have seen the numbers improve over the past 3 weeks dramatically. But still hasn't moved us off that level E, even though, for example, in the age group 0 to 4, countywide, we're seeing under 40 cases in all of Oakland County for that age group. And actually, the highest, of course, is in that teenage year where we're seeing it, but even those numbers have declined over the past few weeks. So yes, for me, to me the rollout, when the survey was given, the vaccine had not been rolled out, and it was purely focused on the metric. Ultimately, the biggest indicator for us is going to be how many people feel comfortable to come back in person. But again, by easing into this plan, because we do eventually have to come back to school full time when it's safe to do so. But what this allows us to do is to transition in a way that allows families who don't feel safe coming back that option, but also gives families who want to come back the option as well. And then as things get better, yes, there will be a turning point, as Ms. Maragna pointed out, of what's that number exactly. We've been trying to predict it. We've said, is it 75%? What is it exactly? And at the elementary level, it's much easier. We could hire, a temporary teacher for two months to do synchronous online work. Whereas at the secondary, a student has 7 teachers times how many schedules, and that's where that complexity comes in. Whereas maybe you need one section of online, kindergarten through 5th grade, to accommodate that. So I do believe that the vaccine kind of changes things a little bit, in my opinion. Again, I'm not an infectious disease specialist, but the schools that have went back at elementary and middle have not seen widespread outbreak. They've had cases, but not a widespread outbreak. And the research has been promising to show that although there's still risks, that students being in school has been overall successful.
One other thing to point out that we have seen a dramatic increase in over the last probably 6 weeks is we've seen a major increase in our Gaggle reporting. And our Gaggle Reports it's a company that we use that searches student writing and work for signs of distress and abuse and self-harm, suicide, drug use, etc. And it alerts our principals when we have instances of harmful behaviors or experiences. And we have seen an increase in that as the pandemic has gone on and on. So we know that based on that data, our students are experiencing a lot of stress, some of our students at home. And so that's another driving factor as well from that data.
So I have a question to Jim's point earlier. So next week, we're going to discuss our thoughts. Are we also going to vote, or are we waiting? Because my concern is if we wait too long to actually vote, our next meeting is not until the 25th. And then that would give you another 3 weeks to plan. So my recommendation would be that we discuss it next week and vote, rather than delay again for another board meeting.
Jackie, we can certainly do that. We could also schedule, if the board wanted the voting the same day, we could schedule a special meeting for, after the committee of the whole for the action item, or perhaps the next day. But I'm open to either option, and I agree with you. We need to, and we can work out the semantics of the plan with the board and the staff to make sure that we have a plan that everyone is comfortable with. But I agree with you. The timeline starts with that vote. So it's up to the board to provide that direction of when they want the vote, and we will certainly oblige.
I have some fudge.
Yeah, that's a good point, Jackie. And if we put it on next Monday's agenda, if we put a vote on next Monday's agenda, I think that's a good idea. And there's nothing that says we have to, the board could choose to table it. The board could choose to call a special meeting 3 days later. There's a lot of freedom of action that putting it on the agenda has. But if it's not on the agenda, then we can't vote on it.
And when we say we're going to vote on it, I guess I'm slightly confused also as to what we're voting. We're voting to say this is the plan we want to use, or are we voting to say this is a plan and we want to start implementing it now? Because there's discussion about if the vaccine goes into place or not into place, do we change our metrics of when we would put this plan in? So what exactly are we talking about voting on?
If we obtained approval at the 11th meeting, we would be ready to implement this plan. And I'd need to talk to Johanna a little bit about this, and the staff, the principals, but probably either the 1st or the 8th, we could implement the plan in terms of returning students. Because again, it's about a 3-week lead time. So if we go out from the 11th, that would give us 3 weeks to the 1st. And again, whether it's the 1st or the 8th, that's something we'd have to work through as a team. But we would come for a recommendation on the 11th of a start date with the plans that were outlined today in terms of the secondary plan that would be recommended, as well as the elementary schedule.
So we're kind of saying pitch the survey results and everything went off. We're asking parents and families, are you comfortable with sending your children back to school if this metric is met? And now we're saying, who cares about the metric? Just, are we going to start going back to school?
That's a fair point.
I mean, that's where I'm kind of confused, because I think one thing is, do we agree with the plan? Another thing is, do we want to start right now, or are we looking at modifying or tweaking what our metric is? I almost feel like it's two different things.
But again, it's not saying forget the metric, because the plan includes the same amount of synchronous time as students are getting today. So it's not changing. The plan is not changing. If a family says we don't feel safe to send our students, they're pretty much getting the same exact thing as they're getting today, except for it's at a different time. They're getting the same amount of virtual synchronous instruction. What we're doing is, for families that we know there's a loss, there is a learning loss. We know that our students are falling behind by not being in person. And every day they're not in school, there's loss that these students will suffer. So it's simply giving the option to our families who want their students to return to in-person, But it's not changing the virtual model that we're currently. I would completely agree with you if we said to our families, There's no more synchronous online. You're going to have a different teacher. We're going to revamp everything to where we can move all of our teachers to full day in person. For example, in my son's school, it was the teacher was teaching cohort A, AM, and then cohort B in the PM. So that teacher was not available for synchronous online instruction at all. You would have to go to a different online learning academy. There's no choice. So in this plan, we're not changing the virtual option, which I agree with you is key to our families. What I can see is there has been a dramatic shift from our earlier surveys to where 70% of families were saying they want to stay virtual, to where now at this point, we are seeing a dramatic shift of more families wanting to return to some sort of in-person learning. The research also is clear that spreading is occurring more outside of schools than in schools. People are going out, they're doing day-to-day activities. Again, no judgment, we have to live. But at the same time, that spread is not occurring among children. And so the research is very clear from the American Pediatric Association, from Harvard, that there is an opportunity cost of students being out of school. And the reason why there's urgency now is because we're approaching 1 year of children not being in school. 1 year. So I apologize for the urgency, but I agree with you. If we were flipping the virtual model, I would say that we really would need to resurvey. We would really need to take more time. But in this particular case, we're being able to maintain both programs for all of our students. We're just giving our families the choice.
So I just want to follow up behind Sarah, because the survey data that we're referring to is data that asks specifically if the metric was met, would parents be comfortable with coming in? And now we are saying, forget the metric, we're going to approve a plan or not approve a plan, even though we surveyed you on whether or not the metric was met. The other part of that is that for some of our families, if we open our doors, they just take it that we're doing what's right for kids or what's best and may just assume that they should come in. Like, I don't disagree that some families should have the option or not have the option. I'm worried though that we're just in an effort of trying to fix the loss, we're not being equitable, because opening the doors is not going to solve the problem, right? I'm not saying that I'm against kids coming in, but we have to be clear. When we ask parents, the last survey, we asked if the metric was met, would you be comfortable with sending your students back to school? We haven't met that metric. So if we want to change the metric, then we need to change the metric. Or we need to resurvey the parents with, this is our plan regardless of our metric, because we didn't survey them on, this is our plan regardless of our metric. We said, how would you feel if we met this metric?
I mean, we could resurvey this week and just ask the question, second semester, would you be willing, currently with where we're at, would you be willing to return to learn? And I think we'd see similar results if I had to predict, but we can certainly throw the question back to our community. I also see that I think returning to some sort of in-person learning, the research shows that there's minimal risks. Again, students are contracting the virus more outside of school than in schools. So, to me, the priority, I understand small business, I understand wanting to get the economy. The sole focus should have been from the beginning of how do we have kids in school? Everything else can wait. And that was not how things were rolled out. And unfortunately, our students, are paying the price for that, including my own children. So, as an educator, of course, what the board's direction is something I'll respect and implement. But I do feel We are at a point where it is safe to bring students back to school, and I think it is what's best for them. I do believe that we can reduce the loss with in-person learning better than we can in a virtual setting.
If I could follow up on what Sarah and Sandra said, I would feel much more comfortable too moving forward, having the question asked, given this plan and regardless of the metric that we passed months ago, would you feel comfortable sending your kids back to school now, given all the factors? And also looking at the studies of, kids transferring the COVID amongst each other in school or out of school, are there any studies on showing that kids that are all virtual have the same transmission rate versus kids that are in person but transmitting it out of school? That seems like a different dynamic as well. And if you have anything, I'd love to read it. I feel like I'm on information overload, so I haven't read everything. Admittedly, that's out there. But I want to make sure we're comparing apples to apples and asking the parents the questions that we're voting on.
Yeah, that MSU study, Jen, does control for what kind of school people were doing, whether it was hybrid, virtual, or in person.
I also think that we need to be careful about the way we phrase the vaccine potential also, because we somehow linked vaccine with the metric that we would consider the metric differently if the vaccine was being made more available. But since we are so slow at getting that rolled out, I'm not sure we can count on that right now.
And there's a difference between vaccine availability for the staff, which is crucial, and also vaccine availability for the students, which it's not at all right now with the vaccines that
But
are.
also for parents and any first line essential worker out there.
I think also in reviewing the survey data and looking at the comments from staff and students, and I'd invite the board to look at that. Our students and parents want to be back in school. I mean, that was the overwhelming message, is that they want, not only parents and families, but our students want to return. And again, it's interesting to see the data evolve over time. At the beginning of the pandemic, students were telling us we never want to return, but at a certain point, that want is there. But again, we can certainly roll out a survey this week that asks the question, like, irrelevant of the metric, right? Irrelevant of the Oakland County Health Department's rating.
Well, I wouldn't. Yeah, I
will word it better, but yes.
I would phrase it. I would give the information.
Mm-hmm.
I would give the specific information.
Correct.
So that they have this. So that they at least have the same level.
By Jim, when you say the same information, are you saying like link to whether it be a chart, a graph, data, the statistics, the Oakland County weekly reports to say where we are for COVID rates, or are you saying the information in terms of what the plan was to return to school?
I would say at least at least some bullet points that point to like the MSU study. There's an MLive article on it, and there's and the study's abstract that we could probably pick some points out of. That MMR data that I talk about, that's pretty suggestive that the reason why there isn't spread in schools, especially at the elementary level, is because of that vaccination specifically, which kind of explains the mystery of why kids do not spread it as much as either older students or the general population. And then also the rollout of the vaccine. And the fact that as adults are vaccinated, even though children are not. That's one reason I wanted to get the information from the health department about if they are recommending additional boosters of the MMR vaccine in adults or older children, because if that actually does help and the vaccine isn't available for children yet, then there would be some benefit there, both for the students and their families, because the kids aren't getting the virus, then the families aren't going to either.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that we still have two options, and we're one of the few schools in Oakland County that haven't dabbled at this point with returning to in-person schools. 90% have returned in some way, shape, or form at some point over the past year. Our plan still has a robust virtual option for those who don't feel safe. And I think, in terms of equity, and again, I speak as a parent as well, is that at this point, we're going to see, I guarantee you, 75 to 80% of schools go back second semester, because we're at a point where I truly believe it's safe to come back. I guess I would like to ask us, as long as we're giving a robust option for those who choose to stay virtual, while also providing a way that mitigates risk and providing an option to those who return, don't we leave that choice in the hands of our parents and families? I don't think we're leading them wrong by saying you have that choice. I believe whether you vaccinate or don't vaccinate, whether you choose to go out or not go out, we each make choices as individuals, and with families and their students, with the survey pointing in the direction that close to 70% of our families want to return. I really believe it's something we have to strongly consider.
I agree. I think it's, I feel like this discussion in the public forum has often been, well, what does the community want? And sometimes what gets overlooked is the common good. And what are the ramifications for us going back to school, for our healthcare professionals and teachers and so forth. So I actually do feel like the vaccinations being rolled out help to mitigate the risk for the common good and give us more space to say to our families, what do you want? So I do want to say that the vaccinations that are being rolled out do impact my my willingness to give that option, and at a not necessarily at a sustained level C, like we had talked about in the metric.
And I agree with you, Mike. Like I think I agree. I want my kids back in school. I want everybody to be back in school. I want us to be learning in a classroom with our teachers. I want it to be, for the majority of people that feel safe and feel comfortable with it, that being what we do. I think the plans we have are great plans for people that decide to be roomies or people that decide to be Zoomies. I just want to make sure from whatever was talked about last semester, we are moving. We're not just going from we're going to be at a metric C to flipping a switch. I agree. I think vaccinations, if our teachers and our staff at the schools were all vaccinated, I agree. I'd probably say, hey, we don't need to be at a level C, because we have a different level of safety that we have built within who's going to be in the school together. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to just say, okay, because we have a good return to school plan, we flip the switch, because I think what we've asked parents, what we've said, and what could be the best isn't necessarily what we've been communicating or stating that we were going to do. We've been saying all last semester, this is the metric we're going to go by to determine if we return to school.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, and I appreciate that there's going to be more. There's going to be surveying upon surveying.
not to say that we have to wait for 100% of people to say, yes, I would go to school for us to go back, but that if we were to say right now, would you return, if the survey came back and say only, and I'm not saying that's what it is, but if only 20% said they were going to come back to school, would we say, yes, that means that we should say to all of our teachers, come back to school because 20% would, even though there's not a vaccine that you've received yet? I think that there's a lot of different, a lot of things. I don't think it's like one vote that says, this is what we do.
Right. So getting back to your question, Sarah, if we were to vote on this on the 11th, that would possibly put us out to February 1st or 8th. And Dr. Bazzi, given the need, like given this shift in the last survey was done on the premise of the metric, is it reasonable to do a survey this week that would adequately inform us to vote on the 11th?
We can certainly do our best, and as Jim mentioned, I believe we could table it if we felt that there wasn't enough of a response rate, or if it wasn't, like if as Sarah mentioned, 20% say that they're willing to come back. Like if the data dictates us to pause, then we pause.
Okay.
I also think the wording of the I also think that the wording of the actual motion when we do take a vote can matter too, because to Sarah's original question, the recommendation could be to move forward with the clock, with day one being the 11th of January, or the vote could be to move forward with the plan, and the board designates day one being upon receiving the second consecutive week at C status, which means by the time the plan is implemented, that third week would be in the book. So the board also controls the timing of when day one is in the plan that Johanna presented.
I like that, Jim. So I just want to come back and say, like, I like the plans. I'm not against the plans. I just want to make sure that we're not like railroading parents. Because our survey data is based on if the metric was met. Because I can tell you, I filled out the survey and I based my answers on the metric. If you ask me those same questions without the metric, my answer would be very different. So if the metric is met, when I send my kid to school, absolutely. If the metric is met when I send my kid to school, absolutely not. So, I mean, those are two things. And the other thing about the vaccine is it's in the news, like, yes, it's available, but who's taking it? Like, who is, who isn't, like, that's something to consider as well. Like, I just want to make sure that we think about all of those pieces. Like, I agree that kids need to be in school, kids need to be learning. I like the hybrid plan, but I also don't want it to seem like we arbitrarily change things, because in the beginning, when we were saying that we wanted to be all online, the community said that we were just pulling things out of the air, which we weren't, but we just need to be clear. We need to be transparent. And that the last survey, I mean, we asked them based on a metric. So their answers were based on whether or not we were meeting the metric. So I just want to make sure that we're not then saying, okay, 70% of the people said they wanted to come back. They said they wanted to come back based on the metric being met.
Right.
Agreed.
So I'm all for the plan, and I would also be willing to say yes on whatever too. I'm for them, like hybrid. I'm all about it. I just want to make sure that we have the right start date and the parents are really for coming back, knowing like all of the pieces.
Agreed. Yeah, and we're not tied to a specific date. That's why in the plan we did not specify, day one with a specific date. So agree, we'll work on the survey tomorrow and work to get it out as soon as possible, and work with our staff to get as many responses as we're able to.
When the survey gets sent out to Danya, are we going to include what this new return to plan is, so parents know this would be how you'd return to school? Because same thing, I think, kind of what Jim alluded to earlier as Yana was doing the presentation. Some parents seeing what the schedule is may say, well, that doesn't work for me. I'd rather stay at home, or yep, I would rather feel more comfortable if it's only a half day of sending my kids, I'm talking just elementary level, to do that. So to make sure that we have like those schedules included.
We'll provide like a structure to the schedule. I wouldn't want to release the full plan because we're still working through with the FEA, and there might be some minor modifications to it and working with administrators. But I understand what you're saying, to say that most likely it would be a hybrid plan where roomies would be coming in the morning, like to give that type of thing so that they know if they say yes, it would most likely look like this.
Yeah, it's definitely much more detailed than I think has ever been discussed the entire first semester. It lets parents have a better idea of what to plan for if and when they went back to school. How is that actually going to look? Because we're not going back to what it was, last school year. It's
Absolutely
different.
Yeah, even just looking at the presentation tonight, looking at concept A, without the times. I mean, if you put in there the times are from 8 to 3 approximately, you don't have to have the breakouts of that really clarified it in my mind and looking at it. And again, like everyone said, I think it's a fantastic model. And I think it's really, once we're in the right place and once we hear from the parents and the families and the students, this is a fantastic draft, and it's a fantastic plan to move forward with. I just want to make sure we're doing it at the right time with all the right information.
Can I just ask the board one question? Are all the board members in favor of Plan A for secondary if we're going to send this out and not Plan B, or is there anybody who wants to consider B?
I very much don't like Plan B.
Yeah, I think A is the way to go.
Yeah, I agree.
No
I don't like
objection.
Plan B either.
Okay. All right. Well, I think Dr. Bazzi, do you feel confident with direction?
Yes, always feel confident with the board's direction, and completely understand where some of the concerns are, and we'll make sure that we do things the right way and capture the essence of what the community wants. So I believe that Johanna and I have the direction we need to move forward and report back on the 11th.
You've done some great work. It's exciting to have a plan that will provide for both people that choose to come to school and people that stay at home. So kudos to you for examining everything and coming up with a detailed plan, and we'll move forward. So that'll conclude item 4.6. Our next regular board meeting is scheduled for Monday, January 25th, 2021. And our next special meeting, the Committee of the Whole meeting, where we'll go over this again and discuss it further, is next Monday, January 11th at 6 p.m. So for those that are still with us, please feel free to share your feedback between now and then via email, and we'll talk about it again then.
And there will be a
And
public comment at the beginning of that
There'll be
meeting.
a public comment at the beginning of that Committee of the Whole meeting next Monday. Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that, our special meeting tonight will be adjourned at 9:22 p.m.